Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time, more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. We are live in the Hive. Thank you for joining me on this, the 27th episode of The Edge of Every Day here on TalkRadio.NYC. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, and for those of you who don't know me yet, I encourage you to check out my bio on TalkRadio.NYC, or of course, you can visit my website, sandrabargman.com. And please tune into any of my previous episodes with my inspiring guests. In a nutshell, this show is about celebrating triumphs, pushing boundaries, and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we're resistant to change, those places where paradoxes and contradictions live in our beliefs and our understandings, both about ourselves and about the world around us. Those places we don't want to look. We live in turbulent times, and we are coming to understand that life simply isn't black or white. It must be an embrace of both, and the more we recognize our own edges and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So, thanks for tuning in. And without further ado, it is time to introduce our guest this evening. Rick Prashaw is a Canadian author, an in-demand keynote speaker, and a storyteller. He's had a diverse career as a journalist, a Roman Catholic priest, an executive director of a national NGO in healing justice, the Church Council on Justice and Corrections in Canada, and political staff to 3 members of the Canadian Parliament. He is a winner of the National Ron Wiebe Restorative Justice Award. Prashaw received a Bachelor of Journalism with honors at Carleton University in Ottawa and a Master's of Divinity at the University of Western Ontario. He also studied at San Anselmo College in Rome. His son, Adam, inspired him to be an advocate for transgendered human rights and organ donorship. His first memoir, Soar, Adam, Soar, is based on the life of his remarkable son, who tragically passed away in 2016. His latest and second book, Father Rick, Roman Catholic, a faith memoir, was published by Friesen Press in February 2022. Hello and welcome, Rick.
Hi, Sandra. It's so good to be here with you.
It is so good to be here with you. I am truly, truly honored to have you on this show. Those of you listening in our pre-talk just now, I got a little teary-eyed and I said, let's get the tissues ready. It's been a while since I have been so moved by a book and by someone's personal story. So here's the book. We're just going to dive right in, out of the gate. Here's the book. Can we see it? I hate these things. There it is. Roman Catholic, spelled R-O-A-M-I-N, not your regular Roman Catholic. How did you come up with that title, Rick?
You know, Sandra, I forget, but
good answer.
The likely aha moment, like all great, brilliant moments in my life, probably was a dog walk. Inevitably, it's a dog walk with my Dallas, who's listening in here. at my feet.
Aw.
And all the great things in my life come when I just sort of forget everything else, love Dallas, go for a walk. And probably that's when it jumped into my head and I smiled because it so was
Spot
me.
on.
And it was so the book.
Yeah, totally. Well, my former Catholic husband really appreciated it. I have to read something for everyone. It's from the preface, and it just really sums this book up perfectly. But why tell the story at all? On the surface, it is intriguing. Father Rick, a Catholic priest. Marriage, a new vocation as father to Adam. A cruel tragedy and a permanent grief that has discovered a surprising life-saving gratitude in the choices I could still make. Dig deeper, and in the convoluted chapters of my life, there is a story that endured, a faith in my God, the gods, in the divine energies, and significantly, a faith in myself. And I can't think of a better way of describing one's life and personal faith journey.
It was always a struggle the entire life, adult life, especially after the calling, the dramatic calling that I experienced to be a priest. How could I be faithful to this God who seemed to want me in service, and how I could be faithful to Rick? Because I did not see that contradiction. I thought that the more I could be one, I could be the other. But that, as many stories reveal, was the constant conundrum.
I totally get that. And as a minister myself, an interfaith minister, and experiencing the call to service, to step out more into that role, but to still have a sense of one's life and what that means. I really can relate to it. That's, of course, so much of why I think I really related to your story, is that it's so, and for those of you who are listening, you're going to hear way more about it, but his writing style is what is so kick-ass. Just turn on a dime, fun, witty, smart, poignant. It spirals, it's not linear. It's really breathtaking. Okay, so you can tell I love the story, the book. So it's many, many stories, all one story though. So let's dive in. You say that storytelling, obviously, is at the heart of all that you do. And I don't know where I read this in my research, but you said somebody asked you about becoming an author, and you started out with a story about being a paper boy.
Yes.
I was a paper boy too. Actually, I was a paper girl. But yes, at 14. So
well, that story is funny because it's so true. I'd sit on the bundle of my North Bay Nuggets and I would read the paper front to back. And all the people who are my customers would be driving by wanting their paper and seeing this curly-haired, red-haired, freckled-faced kid devouring the paper. And I'd put a poker face on it. One guy, John Doyle, who I said, John, I need to know what I'm selling here. So it's important that I read first. And he just shook his head.
So that was the spark. I mean, or which came first, the chicken or the egg? But you know, that news and storytelling and what the life events that led you into journalism. Yes?
I love stories. I love hearing them, and then I started to discover the joy of telling them and the audience that one could have, and how you could change a story. Later on, I was going to meet this Father John Shea in Chicago at this liturgical conference, and he always said, don't tell the Jesus story straight, retell them and make them your story. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing what you're saying there, you know, that you put yourself into the story. You don't have to remember it. And the beauty that everybody tells the story just a little bit different and puts himself into it.
Absolutely. So you did ultimately go into journalism. Tell us about you called yourself your childhood a Catholic cuckoo's nest, which I love. I love, because I can only imagine, it's just I've heard the stories my husband has told. I just love that. So
Well,
please tell us about that.
so many of your listeners either know this story personally or through their parents or ancestors.
Yeah.
And I had to catch myself in the writing because I would tell these insane stories of, the 9 First Fridays just would get you into heaven, fasting, prayers, holy water, processions when I was mortified as an altar boy, walking through the neighborhood and seeing my Protestant friends, follow me on their bicycles. And I just wanted to die on the spot. But once all of that was told, I realized that I don't want people to think that I'm mocking that, because I wasn't mocking it. It was normal. It was natural. It was the time. And that's why I think a lot of your viewers will get that, they'll get that and remember it. So I went back and I just remembered it as the best school of my life, with especially my father and my mother as sort of the lead characters and producers, of the show. But it was so Catholic. It was just such a traditional type of life, and yet it was normal. We were insane, we were crazy, as many stories I tell from that cuckoo's nest back in the 60s. Some of your viewers would remember earlier, and even later with some of the reforms that happened with the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah, very different time, very open time, and with music and the events of that time were calling people forward in very different ways, very exciting ways. So tell me, in choosing to get into to answering the call, was your connection to God and spirit and your Catholic faith, was there an element of, even as a child, sort of feeling a call, a knowingness of a calling, or were you just attracted potentially, and not just, in addition, attracted to the rituals and the storytelling and the iconography in the way that I was as a young person, in the Christian faith that I was raised in? I was really into all of that stuff.
Well, listen, I tell this story that I got strapped twice in grade 2 by a nun, a wayward sister. I redeemed the sisters with many good stories in my book, but she strapped me twice for not knowing why God made me. And I guess she thought that if she hit me on the hand once that I would suddenly remember, but I didn't remember. No, I was more into girls' curls, and I love the heavenly nave upon the ceilings and the angels and the swords. And so, as a young boy, that's all fantastic. But I was one of those rare people, according to friends and what I see then and now. At 12 years old, sitting in that bundle of newspapers, I knew I was going to be a journalist. I skipped career days. I had no idea, no interest in the priesthood. I was going to church, and it was part of my faith. Now, in terms of a calling that takes place and dramatically intervenes, and God, I guess, had run out of patience with me and finally decided to be a bit of a Saul on the road to Damascus story. I don't think I was murdering anybody, but I was having a very good 1970s rock and roll, long hair, music, and smoking some interesting substances.
Excellent.
And here we are in the 70s, and I get this dramatic call.
Okay, no, this story has to wait. We've got to go to break. I'm like, not one more word. This is going to keep everyone on their seat to hear all about your big moment. All right, stay tuned, everyone. When we come back, we're going to hear Rick's big call, the big moment, the smashing moment, call to ministry. When we come back on the Edge of Every Day, stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back with Father Rick Prashaw. So now we have to hear this incredible story, the call to ministry.
Well,
Do we want to back up just a tiny bit and redo that, since I had to interrupt you?
sure. Do you want me to tell
Well,
you?
no, I'm just kidding. It was, you were leading up to it so brilliantly, and I had to interrupt you for a
No,
commercial break.
No problem. I had an usher once at the back of the church. I was going on so long, he started waving his watch. And then when I still didn't stop, he took a calendar that they were selling at the end of the year and started flipping the months, just to get me to shut up.
I'll do a little drum roll.
So I'm a journalist, happy, thinking this is my lifelong career. And one day I tell just a little white lie to my editor, who, great man, Bruce Smiley. And I said, Bruce, I'm not feeling that well, and I think I'm going to take tomorrow off. Well, of course, the real reason that I wanted to take the next day off was a cousin was going down to a mutual cousin of ours who happened to be a Catholic priest in the Seattle diocese. And my first cousin, Tony, was just getting some wedding advice. And so I just went along for the ride for the great day and told this white lie that I wasn't feeling well. Well, God used that meeting with that priest and my cousin in the rectory to zap me. I was actually going to leave and just go for a walk, and Father Barry, the other cousin, puts me in the corner, pours me a scotch, and says, listen, you might be able to use this someday when you're going to get married. But God had other plans. And in the course, as I describe it, and I don't do it justice with words, because it really is something that stayed with me all my life, no matter what was to happen afterwards, no matter the curves that were to come, I was so convinced of that authentic calling. And God just revealed to me, I don't know, voice, just mood, energy, vibes, that this is who you are, Rick. This is why you live doing what this priest is doing in this room. And I did what every red-blooded Canadian boy would do. I ran the opposite direction for about 3 months. I was in complete denial, continued the drinking and the parties and the fun. But it just that moment, that blast in that rectory, in like one conversation, that dramatically changed my life. And I went back to it. And then go back to your earlier questions, then those things from childhood and growing up and the Catholicity of my life, it all fit then. The saints, the prayers, it all sort of propped up this dramatic calling.
Interesting. So you move. How do you move into that? Do you take your 3 months and you settle into this understanding of service, and you of course you know that you want to become a Catholic priest. Have you by that time started to consider or explore other spiritual traditions? Were you curious about other as well? That came later for you.
That came later, except in the seminary, it was one of the most interesting courses I took. I love the Bible. I love the Old Testament, the Judeo traditions. I loved the world religions class. I just ate that up. So there was a sense that even then, what was really going to emerge later was this ecumenical Rick, this interfaith Rick, this Rick that wants to exchange pulpits that some Catholics were cool with and some Catholics were not cool with at all.
To this day.
To this day. And just a sense of this big God that was starting to emerge. But in the seminary, it was pretty much Catholic world. And I was beginning to wonder about the celibacy and how I was going to live it, and the huge struggle in the seminary, and it was to emerge later, was giving up the thought of being a dad, not being a father. You know, even before the notion of romance and love that all goes with that, was this idea of being a dad, not being father to all and father to none, but how can I work this out in my life? And I often would use humor. I just said, okay, God, you want me here, you better just take care of all of this, because I just didn't have it all figured out how that was going to play out.
Well, and the trust in the life is just beautiful, and I can't wait for us to get into that portion. But before we do, I did want to ask you about, because it's so in alignment with the edge of every day, and we talked about this the other day, the mandorla and the understanding about shadow that you encountered in your work. I believe it was at the Correctional Institute.
Yeah, this was after I left for love to marry. And
I thought it was still. Yeah. Okay.
It would be in my NGO days where I discovered this concept. Mandorla is this Italian word for sliver, the almond sliver, and it's when two worlds, the red and the blue states, the victims and the offenders, the us and them,
the male and the female, the light and the
dark,
dark,
the female, the Christians
the
and
edge
the
of
other.
every day.
And that little sliver where you could stand and find some overlap. Oh yeah, we all get up the same in the morning. We all head to the bathroom. We if we're fortunate, we get a cup of coffee on. We worry about our loved ones. We go out and if we have a job, and yet not long after, those worlds call us and pull us apart and polarize us. And yet, so the mandorla, I did a lot of work with some people down in Nova Scotia in Canada, and there were some African Canadians that were actually 200 years in the country, and were of the Baptist tradition. And it was just interesting to get Catholics and Baptists together, white and blacks, and they were dealing with the racism in the high schools, and they seemed to be at opposite ends. But we found that mandorla that said, seniors caring about their grandchildren, fears for their grandchildren, and they started talking, and they broke out of that, sort of racial world.
Yes, the dualism and the polarization. Well, and it's an image. It's two circles. It's like a Venn diagram, but only two circles, and it's again to the edge of every day, and the understanding of bringing the two. We as human beings must find this sliver, that sliver, over and over and over. We're called to find that sliver. And so, well, let's circle back now. Thank you for that. Let's circle back to your ministry and the moment where things started to shift, where you started to choose another spiritual, or add on another spiritual path, the path of, I always tell the story with my former students from seminary, my number one spiritual path, other than all the other things that I look into, is my marriage.
Right.
The polishing that happens with that.
The whole second part of the book is just crammed full of stories. Priest stories, serious stories, fun stories, crazy stories, social justice stories, helping arm's distance the smuggling of two El Salvadorian boys that were completely lost to get them home to mama. The boat people, the whole Vietnamese 80s story of becoming a parish, many parishes of different faiths did. Just the everyday social justice stuff, the notions that I didn't want to fight wars in faith. And so, people wanted to say who's worthy when nobody's worthy to receive, Jesus in the host. I love the line of communion that everybody fell into it, male, female, or none of the above, and old and young and rich and poor and well-dressed in church Sunday, go to church finery and jeans. And I just love that image that every one of us, so even at the beginning, I was reluctant to play defender of the faith. I figured God could take care of this. Yeah. God's big. I'm not going to be his lawyer,
But you were at the heart of it. You were at the heart of what it is for everyone.
That's right. So not everyone applauded, but anyway, it was good. It was good, and it was a good time in my life and a wonderful time. And I guess I had some arrogance because priests would leave, and I would say, "Not me." I would never judge them, but I would say I don't see that happening ever. So this whole love with this woman Suzanne, it just slowly creeps up at the end of the second part of my story, and with just this discovery, this awakening, not only of the obvious physical and the flesh, but the seed again started to come with the notion that I could be a dad, I could be Father Rick, and I could be father as Rick, and for me, as it's happened to not all but enough celibate priests who have just found that they wanted this mix of these two callings. And so I very much talk of two callings in my life: the calling to be Father Rick and the calling to be father to Adam.
Just so beautiful. Well, so when you had to when the calling came and you had to extricate yourself from the church, how was that?
Oh dear.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, we have 2 minutes till break, so we can.
Yeah, that didn't.
We'll dive into Adam.
That didn't go well. That didn't go too well, and that's probably one of the more interesting chapters in the book. It didn't go well with my family when I broke the news to them because I didn't understand that I was their Father Rick. It was so embedded.
It was not only your identity, theirs.
So nobody except my dear mother, who probably felt the greatest pain over the news that her priest son was leaving. She was the one that, with her stoic Cape Breton Scottish ancestry, just was the first person in my family to ask to see a picture of Suzanne. And that was just this beautiful, godlike moment for me, that of acceptance with all of her suffering that was going to come when she was going to hear it from the Ladies Guild and all the other judgments and the story. So it was hard. I talk about a retreat and 40 nights, dark nights of the soul, and yet a freedom came, extricating myself to know that if I can be Rick, somehow I have to figure out how I can still minister, how I can still believe, how can I still fit this in? And that's weird, going back to the Catholic part of the story, is people say, well, become an Anglican priest, become a United Church minister, you can have both. And yet the Catholic DNA was just
too rich.
So there that I didn't see the bottom line was, okay, let's be a minister or priest in another tradition. I knew my calling was to be husband to Suzanne and hopefully a family, and we'll see where that goes, and that would be part 3 that comes in the book.
And a perfect seg. Well, and as you well know, once you say yes to service, it doesn't matter what package it's in. So when we come back with Father Rick, we're going to hear about his life as a father. Stay tuned on The Edge of Every Day.
Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on TalkRadio.NYC every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.NYC. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back with author Father Rick Prashaw, Roman Catholic. And now we get to the point of your story where you are father to Adam. So start the story for us.
Sure. I am instantly, after the marriage, a stepdad to 3 older kids of Suzanne. And within a year, she breaks the glorious news that we're expecting a child. And she being a bit wiser in this, I had baptized about 10,000 kids, but I was clueless about being a parent and a dad. Willing, eager, but clueless. So what happens is she says, it's a boy. And this is early in the pregnancy. And I go, oh, ultrasound? She goes, no, I just know. It's very much David's pregnancy. It's not Lauren and Lindsay's. I said, okay. So the April 22nd, 1993, out comes this child that the intern catches the kid. I should have known that this was the prelude for the entire life in a fast lane for this kid. Says, you are the parents of a beautiful baby girl. And mom bolts up on the delivery room looking for where a kid that we had started in the womb to call Adam. And where's Adam? Like, no. And so it began. And we smart parents, a smarter mom than smarter dad, names the kid Rebecca Danielle Adam Prashaw. And of course, it would take a long time into the teen years, but this tomboy, this scout in To Kill a Mockingbird, Paper Moon, the pitcher, Tatum O'Neal, this is my kid, in spades, no dresses, nothing like that.
No dolls, nada.
No. And so it will take a long journey that we tell mostly in Sore Adam's Sore about this gender journey home to the boy in the mirror that he could not see, but he knew, and we knew he was. And I just, Sandra, fastened myself like the seatbelt, the roller coaster of my life. I grown up with my dad, who was a bit of a comic and a clown, much like the son that my son that they didn't meet in this life. He just celebrated diversity. As long as anybody would accept his teasing, which was 24/7, he didn't care who you looked like, who you loved, what's the color of your skin. So I learned some things I didn't appreciate at the time. And so I didn't have any problem with this announcement. My thing was fear. I just feared for I knew the world out there. I knew the hate, I knew the discrimination. And also he was battling epilepsy. So there was a lot on his plate, but he just wanted that life as a boy to be the Adam that he knew he was. And so that's the 22 glorious years, parenting, the sickness, always going back to a sunny place in his life. In that first bookstore, Adam Soar, he's the co-author posthumously, because I put in all the margins of the book his crazy Facebook posts and his social media. And then sometimes in the transgender journey, when he got into the testosterone, and as we approached surgery that we never got to because of the tragedy that happened, he tells the story way better than Dad. So I just let him take over. He just took over, and he tells that story.
Unbelievable. Well, and apparently he told you on the pillow, to use his words.
Well, yes, and that again is a story after he died, and that's part of my faith. That is, you know, like we can talk about that grief and it's how paralyzing. And I felt like I was in the water with him. He always had epilepsy, but only in the last 5 years he had major seizures, and they were life-threatening seizures. And we had a second surgery. He went for it. He said, "Dad, of course I'm going to go for it. It's a no-brainer, Dad." I said, "Well, actually, son, it is a brain, but they're going to offer."
Exactly. Just to be clear, this surgery was for the epilepsy on the brain.
That's right. That's right. And he went twice for it, and it was reduced, the severity, the frequency, but we never got the miracle that we wanted. And the second one, just months before the drowning, we got a blue light. He had a second surgery. Everything was good. There was no traces of it. So everything was good. He was in a hot tub with his friends one day, and they went down to retrieve some things in the apartment, and they found him underwater when he came back. And that picture, I don't know if the viewers can see.
We can see it.
Is a picture he snaps on Instagram probably a minute before the drowning, when he's in his happy place. His shirt is off. He's telling the world who he is. He says, "I am Adam," and his last words, his last hashtag is transgender. And it was just a crappy picture that I said, there's no way we're going to get this on there. But that was one of the miracles that happened. And then back to your question about the Facebook post, is that I was going to paraphrase him. And he texts me down the top of his head sometimes. That's just the way he is. He just texts me, and it's so Adam. I just so know it's him, even though he's passed. And he says, "Dad, use my words, not your words." and I go, okay. So I had to think about how I was going to do that with a Facebook post.
Oh my. You know, one of the great joys of doing a podcast is deepening into someone's story, but trying to fit it all in an hour is very hard. And so Adam does, they keep him alive, support, he does not survive. And let's move into, I do want to hear about your grief and writing the book, but I also want to hear about organ donorship.
Sure.
I want our listeners to hear those stories.
So on the organ donor side, again, he at 16 in a 10-second conversation with his mother opens up. He's so keen to drive. He's having sort of a break from the seizures so he can drive. And he says, "What's this organ donor thing?" And Mom says, "Well, if anything bad happened to you and you weren't to live in an accident, you could save other people." Well, of course I'd do that. And that was it. That was all he said about it. And by that moment, we knew what his wishes were. So when we couldn't get the miracle that we desperately prayed for and wanted, there was the other miracle in the room. As a registered organ donor whose wishes we knew, he saved 4 lives. He saved a heart patient that was in critical condition, and 2 kidneys, and his liver saved. And in the serendipity of Adam's life, as only Adam would choreograph, there are rules in Ontario and Canada. Most times people do not know who receive your loved one's organs, but the heart recipient, and it was so beautiful that it was a heart recipient, and it was so perfect that it was a man, while the other 3 were women because of his gender journey. Yes. And this clever man sleuths us, meets us, we're great friends. He decides to seize on his lifelong dream to be an actor, and he becomes the narrator for my audiobook of Soar, Adam Soar. So when I go to libraries and I pitch my story in a little bit of a loud voice because of my hearing impaired challenges, I was in the Ottawa Valley recently, and I'm telling people just the elevator pitch, and it's 30 seconds. Catholic priest marries father of a transgender son. Tragedy, through the tragedy, death, organ donor, heart recipient. The other librarian who wasn't really paying attention looks up and says, is this fiction? Like, and yes. I laughed. I did that. Life. I laughed. I said, I only wish it was fiction. I said, you can't make it up. I said, it's my story. It's my life. So the grieving, I wrote that in the depth of my grief, and it's a miracle, really. It's Adam really supported me. I went through some moments of just wanting to give up and let him, let go. My dad, I had to remember his gospel about choosing life, about being not afraid. He loved the St. Louis Jesuits hymn. He would always sing the Be Not Afraid of the St. Louis Jesuits. And I had a dream one night where I was in the water. It was like a ship disaster after Adam drowned, and the water was a perfect metaphor. And Adam swims over, and I'm holding onto this plank, and he takes the plank and he whacks me over the head. And he says, "Live, Dad, live." And I woke up from that dream, and my head really hurt, like really, really hurt. So I knew there was something real about that. And so that was the only moment that I thought I was just going to give up. But I wrote the book. I told the stories. I found life in that. I have found life in the gratitude of organ donor work, of transgender human rights work. I'm in places that you said at the beginning, the conundrum and the paradoxes. Like, I'm there, and Jean-Paul Sartre has this glorious phrase in one of his writings about freedom is what we do with what is done to us. We don't get to choose enough times. I wish more that we get to choose what happens to us, but we have a freedom on what we do with what is done to us. And that, I just hung on to that. That I had choices now as the father of Adam, that was going to be forever the father of Adam. How could I continue this dad relationship with him? How could I continue this relationship with a God who had as many questions as answers for, and who, so much of it was mystery, without me understanding and knowing everything, that I just did not want bitterness. I did not want cynicism. That was not me. It just wasn't me. I wasn't, like my father. It's just choices that he made in his life that he could have been bitter. The dirty 30s, depression, Second World War. He was in an orphanage for 6 years. He had all kinds of reasons, as I found out later in life, and I tell in the book, to have a chip on his shoulder. And he didn't have one, and my son Adam didn't have one. And I made choices about not having one myself.
Absolutely glorious. I know I also heard, we've got to go to break, but I also heard that in something that I read about you or listened to, that you have, what's up next potentially is a story about your parents. Yes.
Can I say that now, or?
Yeah, we can continue when we come back. You know what? Let's just cut it short. You know what, Sam, we're going to cut it short. We're going to go to break a couple minutes early. And when we come back, we will talk with Father Rick about what's up next for him. And we can find out where we can get this book and how you can further follow his work when we come back on The Edge of Every Day.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.NYC, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.NYC.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.NYC, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, keep my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back with author Rick Prashaw, and we'll pick it up with what's next for you writing. You were, I had overheard that you have some ideas for a few books, and one of them being few more books, now that you are such a well-received and glorious writer.
Yes.
Tell us about your book about your parents.
Well, the first one I'm probably going to do, down and dirty one called Father Joe, will be a fictional work, my first fictional work, with just this priest with a deep, dark secret. He and God have fallen on hard times, and in terms of his belief, and it's quite a comic flight from God, quote unquote, that Father Joe takes in this book. But the fourth book that I better get to, or else my parents will not be happy, was probably going to be my first book, but everything else happened in my life to delay it, is that my father and my mother have an amazing World War II love story to tell. And I'm going to tell that story, but it's going to be creative nonfiction, because typical of enough veterans, my dad was just close-lipped about, ever really telling many stories about it. So I'm going to time travel. I'm going to be a character in the book, and that's about all I'll say. I'm going to go back and be in his platoon, and I'm finally going to get from my father all those stories.
That's fantastic. So did you, being an author, was that, when you were a journalist, is that ever something that you thought about doing back in the day when you were really writing? Well, maybe you were also writing your sermons and things. Did you, obviously, did you ever consider yourself becoming an author in all of this? I mean, I know you considered yourself a storyteller, but it's a whole nother ballgame to find your writing style.
I have a couple of books with my name on it for the NGO days, but they're with co-authors, and they were really around restorative justice, healing justice, but again, always telling stories. And whether it was in politics or NGO or journalism or priesthood, it was the storytelling. I can't honestly say that I had this conscious saying that I'm going to write a book, but I do know that when I finally retired and I had some bills to pay and I knew I had stories, that it just so became clear to me that I wanted to write books. I wanted to write for myself.
Yeah, and for Adam.
Yeah, and for Adam.
And that incredible journey that you're still on.
Well, I laugh at myself. I laugh at myself a lot, actually. But I laugh at myself, Sandra, when you keep on calling me Father Rick. And I know you're referring.
No, I'm so loving that.
I know that you're referring to the book, and it's like, pardon me, it must be the old Catholic in me. I want to correct you and say, no, I'm not Father Rick. I'm Rick now, who's a father. But of course, I am Father Rick. And this is the, you talked about the, you didn't use the word circle, but used another really good word. And that's the indigenous teaching, spiral, teaching and your edge work, this constant spiral that I went back. I'm the guy that can't remember why I go to the kitchen now, but I'm so back as a priest, as Father Rick. It's like yesterday, today. I carry it. I carry all the stories, the graces, the love, the mercy, the forgiveness. People said, your details. How did you remember the details? And I said, Oh, that's good. And sometimes it was a Facebook question I put to somebody, but no, I knew it all. I knew every detail of every story, and so I just laugh at myself, and I want to correct you that I'm not Father Rick anymore, but I am Father Rick.
I know. Well, as you have gathered, I rest assured my love for irreverence is big, which is why one of the many things I love about you. So how has, I can imagine that the book tour opening up post-COVID and really the embrace of both of these books has really served you in your grieving process and also your next steps. Tell us about how that's been for you.
I'm just fresh at my vintage, fresh from 3 live events, and it was just like glorious to actually be in a room. Many people begged off with last minute positive testing or other life stuff, but to have 40, 45 in the room 3 times, and I feed off people. My personality is the extrovert, so I feed off people. It was the questions in the first book tour. Everybody wanted to know, okay, you were a priest and now a father to transgender son. And so how are you with this God thing and with church? So I knew very much what my next book was going to be. And now I feel really comfortable to head off into the fiction world. But of course, obviously, it'll still be fed by many nonfiction. But it's that interchange, it's that relationship you have with your readers. I get these love notes that I might have mentioned that, people thought their Catholic faith was like an heirloom in the attic. And a woman said, "You have disturbed me in the best possible way." And I have work to do. A millennial mom said, "I'm not religious, but I'm deeply spiritual. But I understand that I have a lot more work to articulate my creed. What is it I'm passing on to?" I said, "This is fantastic.
This is still ministry."
You just lay the story down, and God and the graces and the divine energy takes over. I think I said the priest who was happy that anybody was saying anything good about priests these days with the page 1 stories. And I tell a lot of good stories. And that's the complicated part where I've always lived, where I feel comfortable in sometimes the mystery, the not answering, the not knowing the answers, but the living it. And I had a reporter this morning say, "Well, what would you have been if you had not believed?" And I was just dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say because I said, "Well, that would be fiction because I don't know that. I would have to imagine not believing, and it doesn't let God off the hook because, why do I have this strong faith with all this insanity that has happened and yet others don't have it? And that leaves me just struggling and wondering and, questioning. So, that's why I just like the storytelling and not really the judging or no more real preaching or proselytizing, just telling these stories.
Well, I can't imagine that you ever proselytized, but you just shared who you were and invited people into the questions. And so you're working with a lot, I would imagine, many of the people that are reading your book and are benefiting from it are people like that young woman who considers herself spiritual or a nun, as we talked about, none of the above. And people who have potentially left their tradition of origin that are looking to find ways to come to terms with that it's completely a spiritual path without all of that. And that your stories and your willingness to embrace that as well is in great service to that.
Right. Thank you. I felt like a dinosaur reading this story going back so long ago. It just seemed like, my great nephew Cruz, who did think I had Jurassic Park pets when I was a kid. But I had a breakthrough on Good Friday after the start of the COVID. I was isolating, coming home from a Mexican writing trip. And I started telling my faith stories to my niece on Good Friday, eating chocolate Easter eggs. And it was all just perfect. And she's a little irreverent and she's asking me questions like, what's this Ash Wednesday thing? And what's so important about Friday, Good Friday at 3:00 anyway? And I would say, Claire, your father, a good Catholic family. So we were having this thing and I went for a dog walk and I said, that's the story. That's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell the story 2020 to Claire, and she's going to interject with her irreverence, with her fun, with her humor, making me my Manhattan, my bourbon Manhattans, and all of that stuff that happens. And so we bridge 70 years, and we come into Biden and Trump, and we come into Black Lives Matter and the pandemic and these polarized worlds and this God Bless America heresy that I call it. If you're not truly invoking the divine, but you're wrapping your God around a flag or around a corporate agenda. I talk about all of that, but it only happened because of another dog walk that I said, I know how I'm not a dinosaur. I'll make this a 2020 storytelling on Good Friday, eating Easter eggs with my niece Claire.
Well, this kind of compassion and this kind of kindness and this kind of curiosity and love for life is timeless. Absolutely timeless. Well, we have come to the end of our show, Father Rick.
Can I tell them where to get it? Barnes and Noble.
Yes, but
Amazon
exactly.
And all the great indie stores, you'll find it.
And your website?
And my website, yeah.
Which is?
rickprashaw.com.
Okay. rickprashaw.com. And you can also go to your local indie bookstore and ask them to get it for you and get a few extra copies that you can share with other people who are coming into that particular bookstore if they don't have it already. Rick, thank you so much for being on my show. This has just been a delight and an honor.
Thank you, Sandra.
And to all of you who are listening in, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. And remember, you are always on the edge of the miraculous. Till I see you next time, take good care.
Under pressure.